Hey, what's up guys, it's Disturbed, and today I'm going to be showing you guys the best support build for PvE context that will allow you to help your team out a shitload while still being able to do a pretty good amount of damage yourself. Again, this build is simply meant for killing NPCs in a group scenario and not really much else. It could be good in PvP, but this build is solely based around using it against NPCs. Not much else. Again, it can be pretty good in those situations, but this guide is simply meant for against NPCs, so take everything with a grain of salt. Anyways, let's get right into it. Alright, so getting right into the build, as you can see, it says I have 213k DPS. I know in the thumbnail I put 280, and that's simply because if you use smart cover, you will constantly have 280k DPS up pretty much all of the time, because with smart cover, you're just going to have it up 24/7. Like, smart cover is always going to be there, because with this build, your skill power is so high that you will always be getting that back. So that's why I put that there, because you will literally always be benefiting from smart cover. So just wanted to make sure to justify that. Now getting into the actual build, I'm going to be using 4 pieces of Reclaimer and then 2 pieces of Tactician. The reason I decided to get 4-piece Reclaimer is because with the explosive bullets, being able to give that to your whole team is just absolutely amazing. It gives them a lot of damage, but the most important thing is that it staggers enemies, and against shotgunners or medics that rush you and stuff, the stagger is super important. So Reclaimer is by far the best set for a support build. And then to complement that, I got 2 pieces of Tactician for the additional 4k skill power. Now, in terms of my actual stats, I have just enough firearms to activate all of the talents on my guns, which is, on my, it takes like 28-25 to activate the first talent on a gun if it requires firearms, something like Brutal or something like that. So I have just enough to activate all of those talents. And then for my toughness, I would have this higher, but I just subject that to bad rolls. Like, my chest piece only gives me about 600 stamina. I do have a stamina mod in, so that's why it says it's more. But I only have like 600 stamina on that. But the huge part about this build is that I have 42k skill. I would have more like 450 toughness, but I rolled for skill power, or not skill power, electronics on my knee pads. Reason I did this is so that I could reach a high enough skill power to where my smart cover is being really beneficial to my team. And since this build is meant for PvE, only having 380 toughness doesn't really matter that much. You could have 300 toughness or 500k toughness, and you're probably still going to get one-shotted by a sniper. I don't really see much of a difference, so I would just say try to get at least 2800 firearms, get at least 1 piece of gear with electronics so that you get your skill power to at the very least at 40k. Mine isn't the highest, but I got it up to 40k. And then for the stamina, just put in as much as you can. If it's under 350, it's really not that big of a deal. I would just say prioritize skill power and your firearms to make sure that you get all your gun talents. Now for the weapons, the reason I say this is a DPS build, it's more of a hybrid build. You are a support build, but you are able to actually dish out a surprising amount of damage considering that you are a support build. You don't want to just stack a bunch of toughness and then be a support build. I'm a Tactician in PvE. So you're just going to sit there and give me a max smart cover and then not shoot at anybody because you have 1,000 firearms. You're kind of pointless at that point. So you might as well just get your skill power really high and then put the rest into damage so that you're actually contributing as opposed to just sitting there and putting skills down all the time. So for your gun, you want to be getting an M1A. You're primarily going to be using this M1A. Talents, I would say Accurate and Brutal. Accurate, Brutal, and Destructive are really nice talents. You want to make sure to get an M1A because these do the most damage out of any other gun in the entire game, just for the sheer amount of damage that they do in terms of headshots. And with smart cover and the right talents, you can easily be doing a shitload of damage with your M1A. So just make sure to get a really good M1A or an SVD. SVDs are pretty good, but M1A is still a lot better. And then for your other weapon, I would say just something like a G36 or maybe a just like any assault rifle really, because the enemy armor damage in PvE is just far superior to any other gun type. So I would just say for the primary weapon, use an M1A as much as you can. Brutal on it and Accurate is just fantastic. Will make you do a crap load of damage. And then for the secondary weapon, go for an assault rifle for the enemy armor damage. Now let's take a quick look at how you want to mod and gear every single piece. Again, my gear isn't far from perfect. I kind of just put this build together tonight, and my Reclaimer pieces are horribly min-maxed. I had a shortage of getting Reclaimer in the first place, so I was pretty unlucky with my rolls, but it is what it is. For the chest piece, you want armor and damage to elites. You want damage to elites more than exotic damage resilience, because in PvE, exotic damage resilience won't help you that much, but the damage to elites will help your DPS out by a shitload, so definitely make sure to do that. On your mask, you definitely want to be rolling for skill power, get your skill power as high as possible. And then for the minor attributes, try to get enemy armor damage. This will improve your DPS by a crap load. I was unable to get this on my mask, but it's alright. And then on your knee pads, you want crit damage and enemy armor damage. I was pretty lucky on this roll. Definitely make sure to get enemy armor damage because it helps your DPS out a lot. If you can't, it's fine. But again, make sure to get crit damage, and enemy armor damage is a nice addition to that. Now on your backpack, you want to roll for skill power on your backpack for pretty obvious reasons. The minor attributes, I'd say try to get ammo capacity if you can, but it really doesn't matter that much. Moving on to gloves, my gloves are pretty goddamn terrible. I had to re-roll one of the stats and they're just terrible. These are the only reclaimer gloves that I could get my hands on, and I couldn't really make my build with using these tactician gloves because these are even worse than my reclaimer gloves. So if I could, I would go for crit damage, damage to elites, and crit chance. You want damage to elites over SMG damage or marksman rifle damage or assault rifle damage, simply because 12% flat damage against NPCs is great. If you are going to plan on using this build in PvP, you can roll for something like SMG damage instead of damage to elites, but like I said in the beginning of the video, this build is meant for PvE. So with that being said, you want crit damage, damage to elites, and crit chance. I got shotgun damage, so I kind of got cucked there, but you know, it is what it is. And then on the holster, for obvious reasons, you want armor to be able to hit the armor cap. Now, for modding your gear, just put skill power into absolutely everything. This will boost your skill power by a crap load, so I'd just say craft as many mods as you can, trying to get your skill power up as high as you possibly can. And then for the probably second most important part of this build, for your skills, you want to be using smart cover with recharger pretty much 100% of the time. It is really hard to max this out. I would say try to get some skill attributes that complement this on your gear. I was unable to, but if you do get some of that, it will help it out. The max damage buff you can get is 50%, and the max damage resistance you can get is 75%. I have 42k skill. This is probably the only skill that's really hard to max out, but even at 42k skill, it's still a monster, so definitely always make sure to get smart cover, because the extra damage and damage to resistance to your team is just so godlike, so definitely make sure to have smart cover all the time. For your second skill, in the gameplay you can see that I use pulse just because nobody else on my team had a really good pulse, and we were all on top of each other, so everybody else could just pop first aid if I needed it. So in that situation I was using pulse. But in different situations, I would probably roll with either overdose or booster shot. Booster shot just for the additional damage, and it is already healing my team, and I still benefit from triage when using this. But overdose is nice as well, heals people up full. I would just say it really depends on what you're doing. If your team is all right next to you, then I would say you can switch to pulse and smart cover, and then you don't really need to run first aid. But if you're in like a certain instance where you need to pop a first aid, you're like, oh shit, I'm about to die, you need to pop that first aid, I would say overdose is helpful in that situation. But most of the time I would probably run pulse and smart cover, because this is a support build and you want to help your team out as much as you possibly can. For your talents, firstly you want triage, which reads heal an ally with a skill to reduce skill cooldowns by 15%. If you have this talent on, and even if you aren't the person healing, if your teammate shoots a heal down and you run through it, it reduces all of your active skill cooldowns and their active skill cooldowns. I'm not really sure why this works. It's kind of weird, but the great thing about this is that it also works towards your explosive bullets. I don't really know why, but it does work towards all your consumables, so definitely make sure to get triage, even if you aren't using first aid. For the second talent, you want precision, which headshots a hostile to pulse them for 10 seconds. If you are using pulse, this is kind of a worthless talent, and you could switch it out to something like combat medic, which when you heal or use a med kit, it heals your members for more, or something like adrenaline. But if you aren't having 100% uptime on your pulse, or somebody else in your team is using pulse and you're using first aid, this is helpful for getting additional crit chance and crit damage when you don't have a pulse up. Otherwise, if you're using a pulse and it's up 100% of the time, it's pretty pointless. Next is one is none, reads headshot a hostile at a 50% chance of not consuming the bullet. This is probably one of the best talents in the game, because even with an M1A, you're landing mostly headshots, and getting that bullet right back in your magazine puts more uptime on you actually shooting as opposed to reloading, so this is definitely a huge DPS boost. And then for the last talent, I would go for critical save, which reads use a medkit during low health to increase damage resistance by 40% for 10 seconds. So if you use any heal at low health, it's not just medkits actually, feel free to test it out yourself. You use the first aid at low health, I've heard you can use even support stations at low health. A medkit at low health, it will give you damage resistance by 40% for 10 seconds. This is probably one of the most clutch talents that you can get. just for when you're in a really shitty situation and you're about to die. This will heal you up, or not heal you up, but it will give you a lot of damage resistance when you need it. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it for the build. With this build you won't be doing like insane amounts of damage like you would with Sentry's Call, but it's really not meant for flat out DPS. It's meant to give your teammates a really good smart cover and explosive bullets, which is just absolutely fantastic. Now you can run with incendiary bullets instead of explosives, but honestly I think explosives are much more helpful as they increase the damage your team is doing, and on top of that they stagger enemies, making them much more valuable in my opinion. As far as the other consumables go, most of them are pretty pointless, so I definitely recommend using explosives all the time and kind of just shrugging off all the other ones. So yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed the guide. This build is absolutely amazing, and I always make sure to have at least one person with a reclaimer on my team, and if they have this setup, I'd just be in heaven. Because you don't just want somebody with like 40k skill power, 500k toughness, and 1k firearms. All they're going to do is pop skills and then just beat their meat while you guys do all the damage. At least with this build you can do a pretty good amount of damage, getting easily up to 2 mil crits with an M1A if you have your build set up correctly, which is just amazing and makes you a very valuable player to have on the team. This build is fantastic in a group scenario and in my opinion is a must have and complements Sentry's Call build greatly. Anyways guys, that's going to be it for the video. If you enjoyed, please make sure to drop a like, follow me on Twitter so you can ask me any questions you want, and subscribe for videos similar to this one. I'll see you later guys.